I have got Kindle as a gift a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's one of the best gifts that I could ever get because it allows me to read books in a very easy format, and I can have this Kindle wherever I want, whenever I want, and it gets place even in my small handbag. If you're not familiar with what a Kindle is, it's a reading tablet produced by Amazon and of course sold by Amazon, and it allows you to read books in a digital format. I didn't think that I would enjoy reading books in a digital format, but now since everything is kind of digital, and I thought, well, having a tablet just makes your life easier and allows you to read more books. So that's why I was like, why not? So since now I have a tablet, I decided to read this book as my first book on the tablet, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, written by Yuval Noah Harari. It's Israeli historian, and he has become very, very famous and successful after releasing this book. Maybe he was even famous before that, but I think when he wrote this book, he kind of exploded. So in this video, I thought that I would give my short review, hopefully my short review of this book. So if you want to know about this review, stay here. The book walks you through, as the title suggests, through the history of mankind. It's a book about why we are as we are and how things developed in our world. When I was reading the book, I have definitely had a couple of WTF moments because some of the things were a bit controversial in my opinion. When I read the reviews about this book, times and times again, many wrote, Harari states that we as Homo sapiens, we dominate the world because of our ability to tell the stories and to tell tales and myths. And it felt like this book was all about stories and tales and myths. But I would say that this book covers many more subjects than just tales and myths. So the book is actually divided into 4 sections, where each section represents a revolutionary period in the history of humankind. So the first section is cognitive revolution, the second section is agricultural revolution, the third section is the unification of humankind, and the last section is scientific revolution. If we discuss the title of the book, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, I would disagree a little bit with that statement because I would say that section 1 and 2 definitely covers the history of mankind, history of humankind, and how we all developed. But section 3 and 4 are heavily focused on Eurocentric point of view and Anglocentric point of view, even if the author definitely mentions some of the historical situations that happened in the Asian world. So now when I give you some kind of introduction about the book, I will cover some parts from the 4 sections. It will be impossible to cover every single point that the author makes in every section. That's why I just decided to pick some of the things that I found interesting. In the cognitive revolution, Harari takes a lot about a lot of things. What I find interesting is that he introduces the terms sapiens, Homo sapiens, that we are today as species, but he also has a term that is called archaic sapiens, and that is like the ancestors of ours that existed right before we came to this life. In this section, he talks about how our ancestors lived, how they developed, what their life was like, and so on. In this section, he also discusses the extinction of flora and fauna as a result of people's movement to different continents, from the African continent to Asia, Europe, Australia. In the agricultural revolution, Harari talks about agriculture as the title suggests. So he says that many scientists across the world say that agricultural revolution was the driving force for the humanity and for the development in our societies. However, according to Harari, it's a tale and it's a fantasy, because when people started to domesticate plants such as wheat, it forced us to settle down and it forced us to work in the fields, clearing the fields, building irrigational canals, and we just were forced to settle down in one place so we could take care of the wheat. So in his opinion, wheat owns us and wheat manipulates the humankind. It's not like human owns the wheat and human owns agriculture. He says that it's the other way around. It's agriculture that manipulates us. And Harari even goes further and says that agricultural revolution was the biggest fraud in the human history. And this is where I was like, excuse me, what? I thought that agricultural revolution was really like the driving force and what made us to people and what led us to the society where we live, but this is not what Harari says. And he even says that because of agricultural revolution we are not free, but we are stuck at one place. In the section, The Unification of Humankind, this is actually where Harari talks about the creation of myths and stories and tales. So according to the author, we as Homo sapiens, we dominate this world thanks to our ability to tell stories and create myths. According to him, in a hunter-gatherer world, it would be very hard for a group to consist of larger than 150 people. But thanks to our ability to create myths and to tell stories, we were able to create nation states, we were able to create United Nations, and we were able to create businesses. There is an example of this in the book where he talks about Peugeot as a company. So he says that even if employees stop working at Peugeot, or even if its founder passes away, or even if the CEO steps down, Peugeot as a company doesn't stop to exist because it exists as a story and there is a collective agreement about its existence. This section, the idea of money is also discussed, and Harari says that money is an idea of trust that people collectively agreed upon. So many people around the world say that money is evil and that it's source of evil and that because of money we have a lot of problems in the world. But according to Harari, money actually unites people, because even if you belong to different religions, nations, ethnicities, or any kind of groups, there is one thing that unites us as species, and it's money. So Harari says that money is not a material thing, but rather a psychological idea, psychological thing. For example, at some point of history, people used cowrie shells as a monetary system, and it worked because people collectively agreed that these cowrie shells, they have value. The same thing would be with dollars or yen or any other currencies. When it comes to scientific revolution, Harari says that scientific revolution is not about revolution of knowledge, but rather it's a revolution of ignorance, because people understood and admit that they don't have all the answers to all the questions that they have in their mind. Harari discusses a lot that there is a bond between science, politics, and economics, and that science and politics, they go hand in hand and they have advantage of each other. So one of the examples that you can read in the book is, of course, the creation of the atomic bomb that was used quite a lot in the politics in the last century. Another broad topic that Harari discusses is, of course, the colonial conquests and their relationship with the economics and science. As Harari says, the initial idea with discovering new lands was to do trade and earn money. But when they understood that they could actually claim these lands, that's when the colonial conquests come into their presence. There is quite a lot of room and space that is dedicated to colonial conquests in the book, but what was surprising to me is that only one page or maybe 1.5 pages were dedicated to the Atlantic slave trade. And maybe I'm not super educated about this topic, but Harari says that the Atlantic slave trade happened not because of the white superiority and because white people had racial hate against the slaves, but it happened because they wanted to make cash. And here I was like, WTF, what am I reading here? Because I was like, well, if the white superiority wouldn't happen, wouldn't exist in their minds, they wouldn't think that they could sell slaves across the Atlantic. But I don't know, scientific revolution wasn't about knowledge, but it was about ignorance, so probably I'm very ignorant about this topic. I don't know. In general, I would say that the scientific revolution section was very broad and it was packed with many topics. It was like it went from one thing to another one to another one. Here you can also read about economics, you can read about consumerism, you can read about capitalism and so on. So if you are interested, there is a lot that is covered here. So this was the review and summary of the book Sapiens, A Brief History of Mankind. Even though I have had a couple of WTF moments, and even though I found some of the things that was stated a bit controversial, I still think that this book is worth reading because it gave me understanding about how the world is structured and how the Western society is built, because quite a lot of stuff that are covered, they are written, as I said, from the Eurocentric point of view. So it can be helpful to read it and to understand how the world thinks and lives. This was the end, and now since I have Kindle, I plan to read more books, and I hopefully that I will be able to read more books. And I'm planning to introduce book reviews and book summaries as one of the parts of my channel, because, well, why not? So if you have any book recommendations, please write them in the comment section down below. I will be very happy to get any book recommendations. Thank you for watching this video and see you next time.